Hello, friends. My name's Host Eric, and I'm here to say welcome to Talking with Famous Feedback. I am driving back now from Merced. My earlier video in the car that I made while driving to Merced. And this is kind of a follow-up, but really just more musings about the extended thoughts that emerged from that. It's not exactly the same topic. I'm talking about pride in this video specifically. Rachel and I were on a live stream the other night, and so pride came up, and Rachel and I both agreed with the old saying, pride cometh before the fall. That certainly has been my experience. When I get too full of myself, everything falls to shit, you know. But what made me want to start this video is just listening to music, and the song that come on the shuffle was a song by Prof. I think it might be called Help Me. But the chorus goes, help me, gonna help me now. The storyline of the song is he's had to be committed to some kind of institution to help cure him of his out-of-control ego. And it's a clever song because, of course, at the end of it, they have this bumpers of like nurses talking or something. At the end, the nurse is just lavishing him with praise about what a fantastic job he did of jettisoning his ego. And it made me note that, of course, FE is an interesting thing. By and large, people don't respond well to self-aggrandizing, nor are they likely to agree with you if you're making a bunch of self-aggrandizing comments. But the one exception, perhaps, is rap music. Because, you know, I like rap music. I like to listen to it. I like to put it in my car when I go down the street. I like to hear the MCs talk about how they're better than the other MCs and we're clever. There's a lot of I'm the shit kind of stuff in rap music, you know. So the thing about the FE issue is that song works. It's a good song. It's a good track, and lyrically it works, but it only works because he's already there, right? It's kind of like there's a catch-22 implicit in a lot of things in this regard. People unavoidably feel more or less confident, more or less capable according to outcomes. So if I try something and it works out well and it gets positive response from people, then I must have made a good decision, is what people tend to think. Of course, life's much more like poker than it is like that, in the sense that all you can ask of yourself is to make the best decision with the information you have at your disposal, and to not be illegitimate. That you don't need any particular information at your disposal, just a clarity regarding the normative framework. But where is I going with this? Let me pause. So celebrities these days, my perception of them and how fame affects them has really changed over the last couple of years as we find out all this stuff about Diddy and just the general shitty exploitativeness of people who have enjoyed too much affirmation, praise, and, you know, enabling to be ontologically healthy people. You know, just to have an identity that's good for them. What's to be noted here is that, and this is where I'm going after segueing from the celebrities, is what about regular people? Well, it is true that regular people also can suffer from too much pride, which you could call basically giving themselves credit for stuff beyond the extent to which they deserve credit for it. So for most people who are very successful in whatever field, a decent amount of luck is involved. For other people who are very successful in any given field, It doesn't even have to do with competency or luck or anything. It's just they're driven, they follow through, they have good TE, stuff like that, right? So you get bands like Hootie and the Blowfish who become very famous because they were very good at working as a gigging band and developing an audience by playing live and stuff. If you're playing live, there are plenty of people in the world who are not going to evaluate the quality of your music based on the quality of the music, but rather based on other kind of heuristics, FE indications, whatever. Like, oh, Hootie and the Blowfish is cool because there's a black guy playing guitar. Even though they're terrible, you know? So, the thing is, success correlates somewhat with your actual competency, skill, stick-to-itiveness, perseverance, and those other kinds of virtues we talk about that link directly to success. And it also has to do with just randomness, good fortune, being right place, right time, etc. Talent, there's an expression in sports, right? Talent loses when talent doesn't work hard. The expression is something like, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. Of course, the problem with that is there are only certain things in which hard work is complementary to talent. It depends what you're trying to do, right? So, what I try to do, mostly with my free time, is explain stuff to people. That does not require hard work on my part because I don't even consider it work. It's just a way to get the thoughts out of my head. And yet, it's also the case that I'm naturally very talented at explaining things. I'm a great natural teacher. This has something to do with personality type because as an NE Dom, I'm going to put the thing I'm trying to convey in a number of different ways. I'm going to include analogies, examples, etc. Those habits of communication stem from my attentional configuration, but pause. But the point is that there are large numbers of people in the world out there who might be pathologized with the expression failure to launch, or might be accused of having a lot of potential and letting it go to waste. People who have a iffy relationship with extroverted sensing are most likely to be perceived as such. And for the vast majority of us, we have to live like normal people, which is to say, sometimes we get affirmed for what we're doing because we did a great job. Sometimes we get affirmed for what we're doing because it matches with what the person wants, regardless of whether it's a good job. Sometimes we get negated for what we're doing because of any number of possible reasons. So, like, sometimes people negate what I'm saying by saying that it's wrong. Other times people negate what I'm saying by saying that I'm arrogant or I just want to be right, or basically saying that you don't get credit for legitimately calculating these things because you are unavoidably a product of your bias. Well, that is probably true for the people who think that, but it's not true for me because, again, attentional configuration determines a lot of those things. So where I'm going with this is as follows. As I was driving back up to Mariposa, I was feeling pretty good about myself. Feeling like, you're cool. You're a good guy, Eric. I like you. You say funny things. You're interesting to encounter in the world. You know, just reflecting on a couple of exchanges I had in the weed store or whatnot, you know? And it struck me like, oh, I used to feel like this a lot. I used to feel pleased with myself. Like, I'm happy to be me. I used to feel like that is kind of a default feeling. But for the last couple of years, in the aftermath of big life change and traumatic events and stuff, I really haven't been myself, and I've been kind of self-loathing. Certainly not subject to having an inflated sense of self. So I was feeling good about being me, but also I was feeling good about the fact that, hey, I guess that period of ontological distress has passed, because I feel like I historically have felt. But it's like you forget that you had historically felt like that until you feel like that again, which naturally made me start thinking about the subject of pride. So pride's a tricky one, right? Because it's generally considered to be ill-advised at best, as in pride cometh before the fall. Socially awkward as well, somewhat in the middle, because, like I said, self-aggrandizing stuff, too much confidence from somebody, too much certainty in their own vision is, depending on where the scope of it falls, can be disrespectful to the equal legitimacy of other people's perspective, right? Of course, the reality for the vast majority of us is pride is the last of our problems. And maybe I'm projecting my own experience onto others, or maybe I'm generalizing from my experience around the channel, dealing with a lot of people who, like me, maybe have a iffy relationship with extroverted sensing. In other words, talking with a lot of fellow intuitards and such. But my general sense is that most people struggle to like themselves. Most people struggle to feel as though they're okay, adequate, worth something. Because the world is by and large hostile to intuitives, certain kinds of intuitives more than others, but it's more or less hostile to people who aren't moving through life prioritizing a very concrete metric of success, Of course, those same people who aren't prioritizing that concrete metric of success are nevertheless highly prioritizing it when it comes to understanding themselves. They just see their failure to meet the expectations of the world as their failure, not the world's failure in presenting standard expectations to everybody as everybody was the same, Of course, you can't blame the world. There's not an individual who can be held accountable. But what we can do, ideally, is use language to change the world. I get it. Maybe 100 people are going to watch this video. And it's like, I remember I used to, on YouTube, I think, hey, maybe one of my videos will go viral. Well, the thing is, there's nothing wrong with you. And if this video were to go viral, maybe people would understand that better. It's true that the world's not going to baby you. And you're going to have to walk some tough walks in life, You're going to have to do shit you don't want to do. You have to take care of shit. You're going to have to adult, etc. It's just unavoidable. But it's also true that all of this buttfuckery occurs in the absence of understanding. So, why is domestic violence no longer considered acceptable? Back in the Middle Ages, the church implemented a rule said you can only beat your wife with a stick this long. Any longer than that, it's too much beating of your wife. It was considered part of one's husbandry powers to use negative reinforcement on those things that you husbanded, be they animals, children, or women. But we now live in a world where even if people don't understand it as such, they operate under a rights framework. So the reason why it's bad to beat your wife and not okay is because it violates her bodily integrity rights. It's a rights violatory action that comprises something morally impermissible. You don't have to understand all the reasoning behind that to be impacted by the fact that it has become the dominant paradigm in adjudicating certain kinds of questions. So you're not going to find really anybody advocating in favor of using corporal punishment on their wife anymore, because they've accepted, without ever consciously doing so probably, that other adults have equal rights to their own, or that they can be held accountable at least for violating the rights of somebody else. That doesn't mean that no men ever beat their wives. There are still domestic violence guys out there. It just means that it's not considered a normal and acceptable part of a marriage anymore. So what I'd like to see is some kind of universal adopting of a paradigm that says certain things are explanations and other things are conveyances or of something other than information. In other words, they're expressions. If people had somewhere buried underneath them, even if they didn't understand the specifics of it, an ability to grasp that, oh, this is an explanation, and thus it needs to do certain kinds of work, or else we just negate because we never have any reason to adopt a change to the status quo unless the prospective change to the status quo withstands all interested adversaries. In other words, you want to get the people who are most interested in saying you're wrong to make the best case they can. And if your affirmation still survives that case, then it's presumably advisable for us to do it.